Today I'm honored to be joined by Susie Branigan, a nurse with over 25 years of experience on the front lines of healthcare. Susie is a powerful voice for trauma-informed care, just culture, and psychological safety for both patients and the people who care for them. She believes, in her words, that trauma is different for everyone, and that leaders have a responsibility to truly understand that. In this conversation, we explore how emotional intelligence, human-centered leadership, and even technology can be used to protect staff well-being, strengthen connection, and retain the next generation of nurses. Let's dive into this important and very human discussion with Susie Branigan.
All right.
Susie or Suzanne?
Susie, please.
Susie, welcome to show. Susie, I'm happy having you today. And today I know it is a special day for you. So before we get to our agenda and our podcast for today, thank you for being part from this podcast. And I would like to know more about you, who you are, and let's get started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. This is very exciting. So I am Susie Branigan. I have been a nurse for over 22 years in the healthcare field for close to 25. And yeah, I have spanned my career doing anywhere from candy striping in the 90s all the way to bedside tech work, nurse bedside work, as well as team leader, charge nurse, and then moved on to managing a couple of units and directing as well. And here I am, midlife, super excited to continue to spread the word about my passions and what I feel like is my mission at this point in my career and life, and that is trauma-informed care and just culture environments, creating psychologically safe environments for our staff, our patients, families, and that could span anywhere, even out of healthcare as well, into any workplace. So super excited to be here and have a conversation about it.
Me too. And yeah, in the beginning, I mentioned it is a special day for you. And you didn't mention why it is a special day for you, but I would like to mention that because it is a memorable day. And I'm sure your kids will be proud for you. So today it is.
Oh, that's so nice. Oh, that's so nice of you. I thought you meant it was a special day because I'm on this, but so that's true too. Oh yeah. So today was my son, his kindergarten graduation, which was super cute. And it was super special because my daughter, who's 10, she graduated kindergarten during COVID, and they didn't really get to do any sort of celebration in person or any songs or anything like that. Everything was on the computer. So kind of was bittersweet because I kind of realized, my daughter didn't really get this, but it was just so sweet. They sung a bunch of songs. They were wearing their hats they made. They got their diplomas, and my son was just so proud. So it was a great morning. Thanks for mentioning.
Thank you for sharing that. And you remind me, your daughter right now 10 years, and she graduated in pandemic. So it's like yesterday. How the time is like.
I know. It's
Yeah.
Time flies for sure.
Yeah. So Susie, we connect together, and I see your passion about trauma informed and about psychological safety and all those good stuff. We hear this a lot, and this as a term, I'm sure it is some of they don't know exactly what is a trauma because it has become sometimes misused, and what is trauma informed and psychology safety. Before we get in that discussion, can you give us in the brief what that meant?
Yeah, so basically, the term is fairly new in the last few years. It has been around, and there are lots of people that are highly educated in it, practicing it, but unfortunately, I know for myself, starting nursing in the 2000s, that term was never used in college. It was never used in the workplace. I don't think that staff themselves even recognized that you could be taking care of a patient that was coming in with trauma while also having trauma yourself, whether that comes from something internal in your outside life that happened to you in childhood, adulthood, whatever, or something that you experienced at work. So there's different types of trauma that staff can experience, that patients can experience. And then, when you put those two together, making sure that you're able to have a unit or a department that recognizes how to recognize the staff trauma, the patient trauma. How do you support both? So there's all different types of trauma. There could be, trauma that happens from one single event. Say a patient comes in and they experience something and they're portraying it to the staff member, and the staff member listens to that and hears that story, and it's awful to listen to, and it's devastating. That's the secondary trauma that you get from that. And then it can build and build and build. And what's really needs to be in the forefront of healthcare is that healthcare workers experience trauma daily on their shifts, years and years and years and years and years, right? So I've been doing this for 20 something years. I've experienced so much trauma, whether it's my own trauma from hearing things, seeing things, experiencing things, or experiencing other patients' traumas. And then you have a multiple patient assignment where, you have 5 or 6 patients. They all have different types of things going on. So it really is about creating an environment that supports exactly what each patient is going through, adhering your care to how you can support them in a trauma informed way. And I could go on for days about what that
I
entails.
will ask you here.
Yeah.
So, as a staff nurse or anyone as a clinician work in the hospital, everyone is having or experience an anxiety, exhausting, compassion fatigue, burn
Yeah.
out, all of those things. Can we consider this as a small t, as a small trauma, or this is something no small trauma? We need more intense in order to classify this small trauma. I don't want to get more into the science for that, but just to make sure those words when we hear them that what reflect in our bodies, in our culture, in our workplace.
Right. Great question. So, I mean, trauma is different for everyone, right? So it's hard to kind of put a level on it at all. So, I could have a certain level of trauma completely different from what you're experiencing, but that doesn't mean that what you went through is any less or different or worse. And it's a matter of, and everybody, they experience it differently. Some people hold on to trauma for years and years and years, and they don't even know it and they block it. That's something that happened to me actually way back in the day when I first started working with children. I blocked my trauma for a very long time. And then I started seeing certain physical, signs that I had to address what I had experienced. The experience for that could be headaches. It could be chest pain. It could be nervousness. It could be having trouble taking deep breaths. It could be insomnia. It could be irritability at work, irritability with your family. So putting a level on it is really hard, but I would say, healthcare workers in general experience the most significant high level trauma that you could possibly experience as a human being, close to being a soldier at war type of thing, right? You see multiple deaths, you see awful situations, you see violent situations, you see sad situations. You also see really happy things sometimes, which mixing those together and knowing how to react. Do I react happy right now when it's actually a sad situation? Well, the family seems happy, so maybe I should react that way. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
confusion.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a lot. And also one of the things it's happened to become more and more, unfortunately, it's normalize it as the violence which we had and bullying. Sometimes
Yes.
we had it from the same staff and sometimes we have it from the patient. And there is now a new trend, or it's not trend, a new line of consultant like yourself. They are working more on the violence. So I had the opportunity to meet one of my guests, her name Mel Cortez from Texas, and
I know
she
Mel.
is, if
Great.
you know Mel. So
Yeah.
hi Mel. So
Yeah.
she also tried to advocate for the stuff about with that. So based on what we have just right now discussed, so those things maybe can be normal psychological, let's say small trauma, or sometimes it can be a big trauma. It depends on the situations. What we can see right now as a leaders, they see this with underrated topics as a leadership for their staff. They see this as okay, maybe it's good to have, it's luxury, it's not a must. But for you, when I do my homework and do my research about you, I found you take this passion in early your career and try to advocate and try to build this community and this workplace to be healthy, and you start to speak about trauma and about psychological safety. So what's the factor or what drive you or motivate you to take this lead initiative and start do that in your early stage?
Great question. So I think I mentioned before that, as a newer nurse, I had a great education, great college experience, learned a lot, but nothing really prepares you for when you actually get to the bedside and you're with patients. You can be book smart, you can, memorize all your medications and all those things, but you have to be a people person. You have to be able to hold a hand and read the room and know how to react in very unpredictable situations. So, um, a couple of my own experiences as a bedside nurse where I experienced some really, really tragic scenarios for long periods of time where I look back and I'm very proud of my care. I feel like the families were really happy with my care. I wouldn't have done anything differently, but they were just such memorable, traumatic experiences. And I just feel like there wasn't really enough education or support from leadership, and not to their fault. It just wasn't really a thing that anyone talked about. You came to your shift, you worked your 3 or 4 12s in a row, and then you came back every day, had the same difficult patients. And I say difficult, meaning like really challenging, sad, tragic situations. Going through that trauma, no one really ever checked in on me, asked if I needed to take a breather. Do you need air? Do you need a day off? There was no like regular meetings with staff to kind of go over, how's the week been going? Are there any particular patients that have been challenging in a way for you, like mentally and physically? How can we team up to help? So I always said when I went into leadership that if I were to become a manager, even though I'd be newer at management and there'd be things I'd have to learn, of course, one thing I would always do was be like boots on the ground, there for my staff all the time, making sure that each and every single one of them were okay during their shift. And that was night, day, evening shift, whatever it was, and really individually checking in on them all the time. Nurse managers are not always in the building. If, you do go home at night and you leave, and, I found myself calling a lot, texting staff, how's it going? Do you need anything? And, you have to give autonomy, you have to give boundaries, but you also need to show that you truly care about the person, the staff member, because if you don't show that, they're not going to give their best care. Staff come to work to do the right thing, and they want to give great care, but when they're not feeling appreciated and heard and all those things, they're not going to be their best self. And then the patient's not going to get the best care. So I learned over the years that in order to have a healthy workplace environment, having a trauma-informed unit where you are monitoring the staff's well-being as well as the patient's well-being, making sure that you're not pairing a staff member with a patient that's going to trigger something that they've gone through, that they've let you know about, hey, this happened to me when I was 18 and I can't take this type of patient. Like, we need to respect that. Like, we need to make sure that we figure out a way to alter the assignment, figure that out, that type of thing. So putting together trauma-informed care with a just culture environment, which I know maybe we'll talk about later, those I feel are the two keys to running a very, very healthy environment. It's never going to be perfect. Units healthcare is very fast-paced and understaffed and messy and all that. But if your staff feel like they can come to work and not get in trouble the second they walk in the door a minute late, or, they might pull the wrong med and realize it last minute and come tell you about it, they shouldn't be getting their hands slapped. They should be like being told, thank you so much for coming and telling me that. Like, that's amazing that you felt like you could come to me and tell me this. And I'm glad that you trust that, I'm not just going to write you up or those type of things. So I always just made it my mission as a manager to support the staff, because that's when they feel that way, they give the best care. And then as I managed more and more units, and then, even got into child psychiatry and stuff, it just becomes even more and more important in terms of.
Yeah, and Susie, I realize, and this is how it sounds for me when I hear what you just shared with me, and not only you, all my guests when they came, there is a themes. It's having all of those development. It came as a self-development. So when we moved, I am a nurse like you. So when we moved with our role, we move by seniority. So I don't want to be very subjective, but this is the reality in most of the hospital worldwide. And from my experience and from my network, I found, so you today are a registered nurse, you will come in charge, you will come a head of unit or a head nurse, whatever it is, until you reach for that level. Most probably you will do this journey by yourself. So no one will, I will not say educate you or teach you the system. And this is not a blaming. This is something it's enough. We need to face it, and we try to find something, because the end result will go for the patient more than for that. All the time we complaining from the shortage and the way how is hectic on the healthcare system. But when you see what you have mentioned, no one teach you how to communicate, how to take to be a leadership. However, when you take your role as a new leader, you try to be close for your staff, at the same time give their autonomy and give them to do what they believe they are, but at the same time, and you are in your back. All of those came from you. So I'm seeing a lot of the hospitals and healthcare system, they are caring more about hard skills. So if I go for my manager, I told I want to take this micro certificate, or I need to take a course in the ECG or ultrasound, whatever, maybe they support me. But if I go for my leader, I asked them, I want to go and improve my communication. Absolutely, they said no, no. So those soft skills, they don't care. They see this is something as maybe nice to have, not must to have. And that gave me that question based on your history and your experience. What does mean for you trauma-informed leader in the healthcare, and why approach so critical in this industry, especially after the pandemic?
Sure. So, especially after the pandemic, which I'm glad you mentioned, there's just like a heightened sensitivity all over the place, right? The pandemic just did so much to everyone in a negative way. But then also, there are things that the pandemic did to shed a light on things that have always been needed. And I think that the pandemic just actually brought it more to the forefront. So, although the pandemic was awful and we all experienced, terrible things, worked long hours, I remember there were days where I would work 6, 7 days in a row, but then we would get time off. That was like a thing they did with the managers, so that in case any manager got COVID, we would be able to cover each other. And there were just all these things we had to adjust to. And I think, even though there were negatives during that, COVID brought out a lot of the best in people too. It brought out, more emotion. It brought out people being more open and real and things like that. And you mentioned there's not a lot of training and things like that for each level up and whatnot. But as a manager, as a leader, is there a lot of time in the day to sit with a staff member and literally, there isn't a handbook for charge nurse, right? You have your checklist of things that you're responsible for, but every day is different. So you could have things on your list that you are responsible for and you want to check off. But then the day you could end up with 2 codes on the unit, and all of that goes to the to the wayside, and you didn't get any of the stuff you wanted to get done, like leader rounds or checking on other staff members and things like that. While there isn't like a playbook or anything for, each of these roles, making sure that people are in the roles because they want to be. You should never just have someone to be a charge nurse because they've been a nurse for 40 years. You could have a charge nurse who's been a nurse for 3 years, and it could be the best charge nurse you've ever had, because it requires leadership skills. It requires respect. It requires teamwork. It requires organization. It requires phenomenal communication skills with the families that come through. So I was always an advocate for, like, is there someone that is shining on the unit that may not even realize that they're a leader? Let's have them do charge today. Things like that. And sometimes it ruffles feathers because there are people that want charge nurse role because it's higher pay, a couple of dollars extra an hour. But that should never be the catalyst of why you want to do it. It should be that you want to lead your team and whatnot. So I always looked for that. I always, brought staff into my office and sat down with them doing, little coaching sessions in a positive way of like, hey, have you ever thought of doing team leader? Have you ever thought of working over in the ICU? We haven't had you go over there yet, because I had a unit, 28-bed medical telemetry unit with a lot of detox and psych as well. But next to it connected was a 4-bed ICU. And, I had staff that never would have thought of going over to the ICU and doing critical care, but I saw the way they worked on the unit, and it was just mind blowing how smart and phenomenal they were with details and medication administration and organization. And those are key skills, as you know, that you need in the ICU. So it's really about promoting your staff and growing leaders. A nurse manager or a leader should never be looking to like boast themselves up. They should be looking to spend the day finding the new leaders on their unit. who would you want to take your place and run this floor if
Yeah,
you?
but there is, I will not say myth, but this is something it's common to be on the healthcare system. When we speak about emotional intelligence, and when we speak about the trauma informed, all those concepts give some of those who believe this is good to have when the situation is calm, nothing on the unit. But when we have a crisis, for example, to code and the same shift, or for example, like what happened in the pandemic, this is cannot be implemented anymore. So
Right.
this is where they see there. This is theory. It's hard to be practical. I do understand this is not easy. It is hard. But again, one of the things also I see it maybe is related for that. We see innovation and bring something new. Only it's happened in the corporate, in the headquarters, where they sit like Google, open space. But this is not the case. Nurses who work on OR, ER, ICU, most of the time they are under pressure and they bring solutions not there and they innovate it. So how stress environment, crisis environment will help us to implement those practice and at the same time encourage the frontline to innovate and bring a new solution.
Great. So just so I'm clear on your question, you're asking how is innovation going to help support these fast-paced environments?
One
Yeah.
of those innovation, but again, for who says implementing emotional skills or implementing trauma inform, it is something cannot be done on the critical unit. This is something is hard. So I'm asking you, how do you believe it is hard or impossible to implement what you are doing with your, you tell me you sit with your
Yeah.
team and you coach them in your busy day, all those stuff, they see it is something is very hard. We are in shortage, we are overloaded, so I cannot do all those that. So how you managed, or what you see, not only as a Susie, as a head nurse, they can manage between what they have to do and what they want to do.
Sure, sure. So I get what you're getting at. So I don't know. I can only speak for myself in terms of, my day to day and what my priorities were and whatnot. I tend to be a pretty fast paced person in terms of, any administrative work I had to get done or scheduling, payroll, any of that stuff that, that was kind of the boring stuff for me that had to be done. It just is what it is. But I always wanted to make sure I kind of got that out of the way so that I could spend most of my day and time on the unit with the staff, with the patients. And I know that people say there isn't enough time in the day or in the shift or whatever to kind of address all these things and to support the staff with these fast-paced environments, but there really is. And if that means that you only get to one or two staff members in that day, and then you just know that like the next time you come in, you have to touch base with Joe because you didn't touch base with them the day before, just like really keeping that mental map of who have you spoken to recently. I mean, I'm a little OCD, so I used to keep everyone's personal files. I used to make sure I had notes on when I last talked with them, what we last talked about, what were they struggling with, what support did they need, did they say they were great, but that I could read that they weren't. We offer things like EAP, and that could be that's an employee assistance program that a lot of people don't know is free to the employee. It's part of your benefits to talk to someone one-on-one when you're having a rough time, and it's underutilized. I used to offer it all the time to staff, and as much as these fast-paced environments, EDs, psychiatric units with high acuity and restraints happening left and right, there still is time to debrief. There's time to sit down every once in a while, huddle together and debrief with people. Ask them how they're doing. I am a huge advocate for debriefing on really any situation where it was a challenge, whether it was a physical challenge because you had to deal with a assault or something like that, or a mental challenge where someone passed away and you had to put them, do their end of life care and bring them down to the morgue. All these things require follow up. And you can't be in leadership nowadays and just expect your staff to come in, take their assignment, take their patients, work their 12-hour shift and just expect them to come back the next day. There has to be constant checking in. And I mean, I probably almost checked in too much. Staff would kind of like laugh and roll their eyes sometimes at me in a funny way, like, all right, no, Susie, I said I was fine, like I'm good. But I would rather go home and know that I had asked, I'm just saying one of my Dawn, Dawn, are you okay? 5 times that day, than not ask her at all. Emotional intelligence is way more important than book smarts. 95% of nursing is you meant to actually care for a human being, right? So you could be the smartest person in the world. You could have a 4.0 GPA and valedictorian, whatever. But if you can't, sit at the bedside with a patient, cry with them, keep your cool when they're escalating, read the room when family needs, space, and even peer to peer. If you're a charge nurse and you're giving an assignment to someone that is, unfair, it's too heavy because it's all patients who are detoxing from alcohol, right? You should probably mix that up a little bit. You shouldn't be getting 5 patients that are all detoxing from alcohol. That's not fair, right? So looking at all those things, I mean, there's so much to look at in a given day, in a given shift, but um,
Yeah, this is one of the things you remind me with my guests when they came. Some of them they put on the table something very interesting for me. Luckily, I didn't have that experience when I on the hospital work as a registered nurse. But this tension, sometimes we need to release it. Unfortunately, some of our peers, when they release this tension, they release it as a bullying. So they start
yeah,
bullying each other and start sometime to build this toxic environment.
yes,
So all of those, it's connected together. So having a good environment, having a good leadership, a communication, also to find a way like what you see, employee assistant support, all those will help them and building with the soft skills to build a good environment. And that good environment, as we discussed, the most important thing we need to take it back for our patient. One of the things I want also to bring it here to discuss it, the just culture.
yeah.
Just culture, I know you are certified in it, and a lot of the hospital, they keep just saying just culture, we want just culture. But in reality, they don't execute it, they don't implement it. So before we get deep, what is just culture?
Sure. So just to piggyback a little on what you said, it is super, and this is a great segue because what you just talked about in terms of like staff possibly taking out some of their stressors on each other, just culture, and I'll go into it, is a great way of ensuring the equity and the fair treatment of all staff in terms of when you have to investigate behaviors and things like that. So, what's an unfortunate and not so fun part of the job is sometimes when you work, you have a fast paced environment and a lot of employees, a lot of different personalities, ages, cultures, everything. People are going to butt heads, right? People are going to have different practices and ways that they do things. You're going to have staff that come in on time every single day, have never missed a shift in their life, and are, out on time. Documentation is perfect. Then you're going to have staff where maybe they're a little late here and there, but otherwise they're amazing, that type of thing. So basically, just culture is a mix of like accountability and compassion. You want to make sure that you realize that staff come to work, for the most part, I would say 95% of staff come to work to do the right thing. Is there someone out there that unfortunately is not a very nice person and they may come in and they're just not in a good mood and they take it out on people? Sure. For the most part, that's not why people come to work at the beginning of the day. They don't want to come to work to make mistakes. So just culture is an algorithm that you use when doing investigations, and that could be anything from staff giving the wrong medication to a patient to coming in late for work several times a week. So when
We
you have
used to have just culture mainly when it's incident happen. So just culture that come here, speak up, and let's investigate and see what we
yeah,
can do that. But very rarely to do it day by day on in operation. Most of the time, our attention go something wrong in the patient safety or incident reporting. So now today you put it in the context why just culture is also important for us as a managers.
yeah. And that's a great point because just culture isn't really, to be clear, it's actually not just for when you're doing an investigation or bringing someone in to talk about a mistake. You should really be, operating under that language and that mindset as you walk the floors, because you run into multiple, if not dozens and hundreds of conversations during the day where your just culture hat has to be on all the time, or else your staff are not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel heard. They're not going to feel like they can come to you for things. So just culture really talks about, simple human error. You may make a small mistake. You've never made it before. It never happens again. And you learn your lesson from it because we're all human. And then you have at-risk behavior. You have, someone that possibly is teetering on the edge of doing something on a repetitive basis. They know it's not right, but they feel like in the moment it was the right thing to do, but it's really risky. And then you go into reckless behavior, which unfortunately I did deal with a lot of that too. You have people that you've brought in, you've coached, you've offered support and change of shift, change of schedule, change of unit. Even we've transferred people to other units to try out. Maybe this just isn't the unit for you because it's triggering you in some way. And I've had people that have moved to other units and thrived because that just happened to be where they should have been. So between those three types of things, it's really using an algorithm when you have to deal with some pretty serious situations and always looking at the system. So I always use a simple med error, for instance. If I were to take out a med from the Pyxis station and give it to a patient and it ended up being the wrong med, you're not supposed to look at the end result. You're not supposed to look at, did the patient die? Did they get, they vomit everywhere because this was a terrible, reaction. You're really supposed to look at, okay, what happened? Why did it happen? What led you to give the wrong med? Did you know there was a policy you were supposed to follow? For meds, did you follow the 5 rights, right? Did you bring the med in, but you didn't scan the patient because you used the barcode that you had taped to a wow, like things that staff use all the time, unfortunately, to bypass systems. So you have to look at it very granular. You have to look at exactly the steps of what happened, because at the end of the day, it usually comes down to a systems error. So
But
maybe they
Susie, when
don't.
they do that not to pass those policy and the procedure and all those protocols. They do that because there is a challenge. I'm
Yep.
not giving them the excuse, but one of the just culture to understand the system. And there is something is wrong on the system. The system built to help us. If we pass those, that means it's not work for us. So from your experience, what is the practical steps the leader they can do in order to promote the just culture?
Sure. So just culture is something I was actually trained in many, many, many years ago. It was like a 5-day course. I traveled with another employee, another peer of mine. And then when we came back, we utilized it on our own units, kind of as a pilot type of thing. And then eventually did train the rest of the organization, and so on and so forth. So it is something that I recommend that organizations select maybe even a couple of super user type leaders to get actually certified in just culture, because it is a very intensive training. And then those people can, train the trainer type stuff within their own organizations. And really, it's a very, very, very simple algorithm, very simple thing. You can't go wrong with it. And I will say you will see a huge change. What you want to do too is not only train leaders in it, but you have classes as well with the staff, showing them that this is how we operate here on this unit. We will be fair with everyone, regardless of how many years you've been a nurse, if you're a tech, if you're a secretary, if you're a security guard. This is how we operate. Everybody gets treated the same. And it just, you'll see turnover go down. I had very low turnover. If I did have to let someone go, I will tell you, and should probably raise her hand on here or like the comment or something. I had an employee that she, for years, was a phenomenal bedside tech. Phenomenal. One of the best I've ever seen. The care she gave was just amazing, especially end of life, bathing, skincare, all that. She was meticulous. But she wasn't really a team player. She didn't like to work with others. She liked to do all of her work alone. She didn't want help. She was pretty critical with other staff's care. She'd say, well, why did you do this way? I didn't like how you did that. And it rubbed people the wrong way. And I spent years with her coaching and supporting her, showing how much I appreciated what she gave to the table, but also what I needed to see a little bit differently because she was kind of intimidating others and scaring others. And this went on for years. And there were days that I saw improvements, and then there were days where she would go right back to, square one. Eventually, unfortunately, I did have to let her go, but that was after several coachings, EAPs, performance improvement plans. And to this day, she will tell you that letting her go was the best decision because that's what made her change as a human being. Like she needed kind of that, for lack of a better word, like slap in the face. She needed to be fired, basically. I
Yeah,
think she had been let to behave that way for a very long
something
time.
to
And
shook her in
when the
order to see the
staff
real life.
saw this happen, yeah, and when the staff saw this happen, of course they felt bad. We all felt bad, but they're like, okay, Susie really does address behaviors. And nobody can act that way anymore. So it brought all that kind of that eat the young bullying type of behavior on the unit down, because they saw that that's not what happens on this unit. People will be held accountable for bullying and things like that. So, there is good things that can come out of this stuff too. When staff see that you deal with stuff, then they know they can't do it anymore, and it becomes a healthier environment where people want to be.
You are talking and try to think about the next question because you bring a very good example and reality. You remind me with my day to day back in the hospital. So I will ask you right now. I think we cover a lot of the things when it's coming for the culture and also the informed trauma. So
Mhm.
now let's move a little bit for the technology. When it's
Mm.
coming for technology, immediately the stereotype we think about electronic medical record or medication administration, all those things, BCMR, barcode, all those things. Let's put those aside. It's very important and we know there's value. But now I want to ask you, as someone believe in coaching and you did a huge and massive work with your team coaching them, and take this example for this tech who has meticulous work and phenomenal work. Okay, but she has something need to reshape it. Okay, so how you think as a leader or someone who have this supervision responsibility, taking care for everything and with such behavior need to take care for that. We know this is very important and your responsibility to shape her or to shape him and put them in the right place. But at the same time, you have another responsibility, another team you need to spend with them. How you see that technology can help leadership and the line manager in order to support their team and also to implement those practice for trauma informed and soft skills, emotional intelligence, whatever. So from your perspective, how you can see the technology, if this is helped or we wish could help?
Yeah, I would say that I think there's still a lot more that needs to come in terms of helping leadership, especially when it comes to like reducing the cognitive load of a leader. Because, like I've mentioned a couple of times, that role is very overstimulating. It's very intense. It's nonstop. The days in management, we always joke as managers, we never get to, go to the bathroom, eat lunch. We don't drink enough water. It's just constant, right? I would say that although I haven't seen a ton of it yet, I'm excited to see some innovation around taking the workload off the manager for like the administrative type of things. So if there was some more innovations in AI, whatever, around streamlining schedules, streamlining payroll, streamlining all those kind of work desk type stuff, that would give us more time back in our day to be out on the unit to deal with the trauma that's going on. Like I said, I am a pretty fast-paced person, but it was like nonstop all day, and you do have responsibilities. So if you have a payroll deadline by noon on a Monday, but there's a bunch of stuff going out on your unit and you want to be out there with the team, you still really can't abandon the payroll. It has to be done by you, right? So I would say my dream and what I would like to see with tech and innovation is more user-friendly, streamlined processes for the administrative tasks for leaders. The payroll and scheduling systems that I use are still very archaic. Even using Excel spreadsheets still to make a schedule that takes hours. There needs to be a lot more out there, more advertising of what is out there for leaders. I'm just kind of advocating for myself that I would have loved to have that, because then you have that time back on the unit. Does that make sense?
It does. And here I want to ask you how much the frontline user, or this, I don't want to take it too ticky, but being on the health tech companies as a product manager and implementation, every time we try to sit with the real user to understand their problem and make sure when we give them a solution, that solution works for them. Not something we thought this is what they want, something we make sure that what they need and it's work for them. So as a busy day for the head unit and they have a lot of the stuff, how they can engage with the other department like IT or the leadership to make sure when they contract with the third party to bring their solution, that solution work for them. Because I believe the leadership, they don't know what the line manager or in the middle what they are doing. So How this is because this is issues everywhere. I keep hearing every time.
It's really hard because I really don't even have an answer in terms of it is. I agree with you that it's extremely hard to get to the end user on a particular shift. Short of, I mean, I would suggest, and I've done this before for certain new initiatives we're doing on the unit. Sometimes you do have to look for leaders and people that you know have great feedback on things. You would always want to make sure you're tapping a staff member who can see both sides of things, right? That isn't just going to talk about the negative, the negative. Well, we can't do this. We're too busy. We're never going to be able to do this. There's not enough time. I don't have time for this. You do want to make sure you're bringing in people that are open-minded, open to hearing what you have to say. And it may be a matter of, and I know people hate staff meetings, but even a 20-minute after your shift, can you volunteer, giving a lot of time ahead, right? Next week on your shift, do you mind meeting with me on Tuesday after your shift? And I have a few questions I wanted to ask you about a product that we're looking at. And they'll feel more respected because you're respecting their time, you're asking their permission. Sometimes you even have to offer to pay them extra to stay. But yeah, going up to someone during their shift in the middle of when they're supposedly, supposed to be concentrating on their documentation or their care, we do see it as disrespectful because there just isn't time. So I would say asking the staff to meet you halfway, when can we meet, that type of thing. And then always making sure that I feel like all tech companies, tech teams needs to have nurses, healthcare workers on their team. So if you're a company that's selling a product the end user is going to be a healthcare worker, you should definitely have a good amount of healthcare workers on your team that daily, that is their job to review the product with you, hey, we were thinking of adding this piece to this whatever. Do you think that would work on a med-surg unit? Do you think that in an ICU this would fly? If you don't have the input from an actual healthcare person, you're not going to get the buy-in, you're not going to get the trust, that type of thing. No one's better than the healthcare worker in terms of creating and perfecting a product.
Yeah, but one of the I see because I've been in the health tech company. And the reason why the companies sometimes I am one of the few who have clinical background working on the software development. I used to work. Right now, I don't work with any company. I am independent. But at that time, I was a few, and still many of the company they don't hire a clinical for many of the reason. But why they don't hire and why don't put those, let's say, the right percentage of their team? Because the hospital, they don't force them. The hospital, they accept whatever the vendor they give them. And here come back again, if you know the RACI matrix during the implementation, the staff nurses or the nurses or whatever the end user, they more responsible is not accountable. So the main driver or the decision maker at the end is not who will use the system, the one who is not using the system, but he or she, because of that leadership, they believe this is good from pricing perspective, from support perspective. They see something the end user they don't see. It's sometimes it's valid. I don't say it's not valid, but we need to balance that. At the end, most of the time, when I go for the end user, I found that they are not happy because it's not user friendly. It's not solve the problem they thought they will solve. And so my question here, how we can inject the nursing or the front line on the things really they can change on their day to day, not just listening for them. So you mentioned the way how we can listen for them. So thank you, Susie. I ask you to come after your shift. I want to take your feedback. I took your feedback, then I put it in the garbage. With all respect, not because I don't like it, but because I don't see this is the right time to do that.
Well, it's hard. I think there has to be a mixture of some things. I think that there isn't enough healthcare workers out there that know how valuable they are in the tech industry. Myself, I'm, in the last year or so, I have come to find how valuable I am and my colleagues that are in healthcare are with all of this AI and tech and all that. Because, at the end of the day, am I an engineer? No. Am I very good at math calculations? No. Building things? No. But I am an end user. I am someone that has been at the bedside that would be using this product. And I think that what teams need to make sure of is when they're creating any sort of technology, that they're bringing in all the brains necessary in the room. You're bringing in a healthcare person, you're bringing in a math type person, you're bringing in an engineer, you're bringing in a finance person. You have to have all those hats, right? And then everyone has to be respectful of those hats. So not overstepping. So, a finance person shouldn't necessarily be chiming in on, well, I don't think they do that at the bedside. Okay, well, maybe you don't think they do, but I've been doing it for 22 years and I'll tell you they do. So, and same thing, like I shouldn't be suggesting what something should really cost if that's not really my department. So, I just don't think that nurses or healthcare workers in general know how valuable they are, and we just need to do a little bit more self-empowerment and showing what we can bring to the table. Because I do know that, the product that I used on the child psychiatry unit that I ran, I eventually did become the vice president of clinical experience on that team. I've had people when doing demos say, this demo was amazing and thank you so much because it's great coming from a nurse who's used it and that you say it works and it does work. And now we trust it, trust that, So it behooves you to have as many healthcare workers on a team for any sort of innovation if you're going to be selling to the actual end user being a healthcare worker.
Absolutely. Susie, you play a different role in different leadership position and different healthcare settings, and also you work on the under the healthcare system and also on the corporate and commercial setup. However, so before we get more into innovation and consulting and what you try to do to improve the healthcare system, let me ask you back on the days, okay? Remind yourself when you are the head nurse, and now with all those technology, picture some solution. One solution will help you as a head nurse, and one solution will help the frontline nurse. And those solutions mainly targeted because we keep saying burnout and anxiety and all those stuff. So, what you think? Any, even if it's not in the market, something we picture it, something as a head nurse and for frontline, if it's there, will help us to mitigate the turn or sorry, yeah, we can mitigate the turnover and also mitigate the burnout among the staff.
Sure. I mean, in all my years of healthcare, the number one thing that staff will always complain about, and understandably, is understaffing and overcharting, spending most of their shift on the computer charting when they want to be at the bedside with the patient. So I would say, back when I was a charge nurse, I would have loved to have a way for there to be a more streamlined way to get what I had just done in the patient's room, whether it was a full head to toe assessment or a wound change or and out of bed to the chair and not documenting ambulation and bathing and all that. I would have loved for there to be a way for like an automated system that was HIPAA compliant, non-camera based, anything like that, that would help me get that stuff into the chart without having to literally sit there and type it in. Taking your eyes off the patient and typing, of course, they understand that you have to do that. That's part of your job. But I used to hate when a patient was talking to me and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I know. I'm sorry. Let me just write this down. I'm listening. I'm
Yeah.
listening. And so I would have loved for something that is hands free, that type of thing. I dream in terms of trauma informed, and it would have to, you'd have to, this would probably take years to do, and it might even be in the works, but some sort of system that helps to identify a patient's like trauma history and helps the staff member understand the trauma in the moment instead of trying to like figure it out and how to deal with it, going back to the desk and talking with their other peers and saying, I don't really know what's going on with him. I think it's this, I think it's that. Let me page the doctor. I'm not sure. And then hours go by before you're even able to address what the patient needed because there isn't enough education in psychological disorders, mental health disorders, and trauma in general, identifying trauma. So my dream would have been to have like some sort of innovation that helped to generate trauma like identifiers. Trying to think what else. Really, yeah, it would be around like getting that nurse back to the bedside away from the computer and really being able to identify trauma.
Yeah, spend more time to be a human, communicate with the patient, communicate with the peer, try to think how we can improve, how we can give better outcome, patient outcome for sure, not to spend time how to document it and make sure I am legally compliant and I don't have any issue with this. And this
Yeah.
is a big topic there also.
Absolutely, and the double documenting and, I mean, even, Epic right now, everybody says, "Oh, Epic is great, Epic looks beautiful," but I rolled out Epic with my unit after using Meditech, and even though Meditech looked like the Oregon Trail in terms of, how, like, archaic it looked, sometimes we wish that we were able to go back to Meditech for its simplicity because Epic sometimes is too complex, and, I would press on a report to run a report on how many catheters I had on the unit, and it would circle and circle and circle, and pull up 18, it just wasn't user friendly and that added more time to our day. So there's just got to be better stuff out there. We have to get the staff back to the bedside. It's our favorite thing to do. No one went to nursing school to sit at a computer. I know I didn't. I thrive on being in a patient's room. I could be in there all day. I think that's why I love the ICU so much because you usually got a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 and you could really really spend the entire day with that patient. Yes, you had to be at your computer here and there, but I would say that was the most connected I felt to patients was in ICU because you truly were like 1-to-1 the whole shift.
Absolutely. Now let's move for your role or your different hat which you have it now working with the innovation setup and also consulting. How
Mhm.
you can balance between existing issue right now which we have it and you know it and you witness it and in the hospital and not be over promises for the client and your customer to deliver those innovation or technology or feature or whatever you call it, so how you can balance between what they need, what you can offer?
Well, you always want to make sure that as much as technology is amazing and it is taking a lot of cognitive load off of us. I know as someone who is a perfectionist and has to check things multiple times to make sure it's right and perfect for me and whatever, innovation in tech has been extremely helpful to me to help to save time, review things I'm working on and give myself that confidence that like, yes, what I just wrote or what I'm about to say, that makes sense. But I will always be an advocate for, in the healthcare field especially, it's human to human interaction that is what people want the most. If you are a patient coming in, you could be a very outgoing person that loves talking to people that comes in as a patient. And even if you're feeling awful and sick and you're in the worst place mentally, you still might be a chatterbox talking to staff, blah, blah, blah. You want that human interaction. You may be someone who's an introvert and you're there and you're sick and you don't want to talk to a soul in the world. You want your door closed. You don't want anything but your meds and then you want to be left alone. That's fine too. But we need to be able to utilize and leverage technology to be able to understand the patient's need and then make sure that we meet them exactly where they want. So if that patient does want more face to face, we shouldn't be presenting technology that is going to take that away. Technology should really only be there to enhance patient satisfaction and experience and not take away from the human factor. I would never want to see a robot come in and give me my meds, period. I don't even care. I don't
It's
even care.
it's coming. It's coming. At least it is there on the OR. We have that already. Now maybe we can see it in the patient room. And this is one thing it's very interesting. When we see technology, we see robotic, it's replacing us, but we never ever try to find how technology can solve our problem. Let
Mhm.
me clarify. You start your career as a registered nurse. Now you become as a consultant and also providing services for the healthcare sectors, giving them a solution. But since that day and before that, before our type of ages, never ever the technology solved, for example, employee retention. Till
Mhm.
now, we keep seeing the same things, and none of those technology is doing that. Why? Why right now with the AI we keep thinking how AI will replace us? Okay, at the same time with all those technology, we reach for the moon till
I
now,
know.
but we don't find a way to mitigate the turnover and save our employee.
Well, I think there's only so much, and I'm a huge advocate for AI and technology, absolutely for sure. But then I also ground myself and go back to my roots of the human connection. And I think that we can get pretty far with replicating emotions and feelings and heart and whatnot. But I think the reason we're not able to get to, you specifically mentioned retention, you can't. I don't know that there's a technology out there that will keep the staff on your unit more than the leader themselves and the peers that are around them, making them feel welcome, supported, understood, heard, empowered, respected, all those things. So maybe it's just that there are certain things in technology that can't solve the human part of it, right? So because retention's just so psychological, like having someone stay after, you hire someone in 2025 and, people are moving pretty fast nowadays. People are leaving jobs within a year instead of doing the whole 10, 12 years at one job and like to bounce around and things like that. And we should always support staff that want to increase, to further their career. I've never had someone come in my office and say, Susie, I'm going to be resigning because I'm going back to school to be a nurse practitioner and I'm going to need this and this, and I just can't do my hours anymore. It's really the wrong thing to do to say, what do you mean? Like, I need you on the schedule. Like, you just started here, right? You have to support those people, their aspirations and goals. And normal turnover like that happens. You can't stop people from moving to another state or another country or, deciding to take time off to have children and they can afford to do that. Like, you can't fault people for that. And I don't know.
This is normal and this is healthy.
It's
Our
healthy.
sister who is leaving the healthcare sectors and not find anything to reutilize the skill set within the healthcare sectors.
Mm-hmm.
So they leave it and work something not related for their experience or their major. This is sadness here where we lose those talent for no reason.
I know. And that's why we have to take care of our staff. We have to take care of our leaders too. So I will always be an advocate for, leaders are human beings too. And we are exhausted and burnt out. And, the reason I made a transition in my career is because my family comes first, my friendships come first, my health comes first. And as much as I gave 110% to my patients and staff that I managed all those years, it took a physical, emotional toll on me to be 24/7 with a pager, a cell phone, email, all that 24/7, 365 days a year. It gets exhausting. Any human being would get burnt out after a while. And it's important that organizations support their leaders as well, because we are the hamburger in between the buns of senior leadership and the staff, where we have to deliver information to staff that might not be that popular because senior leadership wants us to, and that's just is what it is. We have to deliver information to senior leadership that staff are unhappy on certain things. So it's a very taxing role. And nurse managers need more support. They need more, understanding that it's a very, very difficult job, and it's 24/7.
Head nurse needs support. How does support look or sound?
It can be, it's different for everyone. So for me, I don't like to be micromanaged because I know at the end of the day that I was raised by parents that, my work ethic is, if I'm at work, I'm doing work. I want to do my best. I'm not, eating bonbons, twiddling my thumbs in my office with the door closed. So to be questioned on what I'm doing or where I am, or, did you work the night shift last night? Oh, you were here on nights. Well, why aren't you still here at 4 p.m.? Well, my son had a game, but I was also here at 2 a.m. already. Like, it's been a long day. Those type of things. Like, when you hire a manager or hire a leader, you should already know that they're there to, if you're here hiring the right person, they're there to bring their best. And micromanaging's tough, not giving accolades at all and just kind of pointing out what's wrong on the units. Why didn't you admit this patient quicker? Why does so-and-so have so much overtime when we're probably on top of it anyways? It's just, we don't talk about every single thing we do. So yeah, there's everybody's different in what they need. I would just say letting us do our job, and because we do give our all. I haven't met a nurse manager really that isn't in it to give the best care to the patients on the unit that they're running. Everybody has different personalities and how they treat people, and that could be toxic too within a group. But I don't know. It could just be being a little bit more flexible, that type of thing.
You believe on and you are very advocate and supportive for coaching and mentoring the staff. So do you think a head nurse and charge nurse, they need to be coached by their leaders? and their leader need to be coached also.
Coached in what way? Like given instruction in terms of like, hey, I would have done something differently today. I saw that you did this and I would have done it that way. Is that what you're asking?
This more in mentoring. No, coaching, sometimes you need someone to help you to develop your personality,
Oh,
something
yeah.
you to share it. It's very hard when this is to share with your manager, but somehow like what you try to build the career and the growth and the human side of each of your stuff. The same thing, because you mentioned a head nurse and the leadership, they are a human and they have
Mhm.
a big responsibility. So who take care for them? Is
Oh,
the upper
that's me.
manager.
That's me right here. That is my responsibility 100%. And I mean, other people may have other opinions, but I always took care of my leaders. And again, I think I mentioned earlier that you have to be very, very careful, strategic, and lead with heart when it comes to picking and choosing team leaders and head nurses, because again, these people need to have multiple skills of high emotional intelligence. They need to be trauma informed. They need to be able to read their peers because they're the ones handing out the assignment, right? And I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had people think they should be a charge nurse because of the years they've been a nurse, but they don't know how to give a fair assignment. They're not nice to the nurses, bossing people around. They're making techs do their work for them, and staff are seeing them sit in the nursing station and they're making more money than them. Like staff see all these things, whether you like it or not, everybody sees everybody else's behavior. Would I love for people to focus on themselves a little bit more? Yes. But the reality is when you're in a room at a nursing station and there's 15 people sitting around, they're all watching each other's behaviors, right? You wouldn't do any service to your staff to not coach and check in with them frequently. I mean, I used to just kind of sit with my staff, but then inadvertently take in what was going on. And then later on, whether it was the end of that shift or the next shift, I'd pull them in for a nice, comfortable conversation, not intimidating, nothing punitive, always coaching based of like, hey, yesterday when you guys were doing the board and you were dividing up did you realize that you gave, I'm making up a name, Joe, like 4 patients that are on precautions and this nurse got none? And then they say, well, yeah, but she would have yelled at me if I gave her any of those. Like, those are you have to have those conversations because no team leader should feel scared to give out an assignment because they're scared to get yelled at by like another peer. So it is constant relationship building. It is constant evaluating emotions, evaluating behaviors, and calling it out in the moment. I mean, troubleshooting things all day long. It's a lot of work. I love it. I love helping people in any way, and I try to always do it in a very caring, non-punitive way because I always want people to succeed.
Absolutely lovely, lovely. For sure, your staff will be happy with you and they are proud.
Oh, I love my staff. I miss them all the time. Anytime I ever left anywhere, it was devastating because I miss them so much. I would never have left a role because of the staff or the patients or the whatever. It's just to move on and to fulfill some of my own dreams, and they supported that too.
I never work with you, but I feel that energy of teamwork and caring and non-punitive culture. So let's end up our episode today. I believe your mindset and your character and your attitude and behavior and what you are trying to do is crystal clear, and you have a very valuable mission. What is your mission? What's coming for consulting and innovation? What is the things right now you are trying to enhance, develop, because now you are working in this space? Till now, this is not clear for me to read it. If you can help me to see what is in your plate.
Sure. So it's kind of a smorgasbord of things because I do feel like when it comes to psychological safety and like healthy work environments, there's just so much to cover. You could say, hey, I am going to go and do a consulting on this at this organization who's having trouble with toxic behaviors and they need training in just culture, and the leaders don't have any of that training. They're newer novice leaders. They need that. Or it could be anything from safe environments. So I have a lot of experience, whether it was the 12 years in med surge where I went through dozens and dozens of joint commission and state visits where you had to have an impeccable unit. You couldn't have any sharps anywhere. You couldn't have ligature risks anywhere. Documentation had to be impeccable. all the way down to dust bunnies that run underneath a med closet that you couldn't have. Those things I do specialize in at this point, and I do pride myself on. It's part of why my perfectionism comes in handy, because anytime we would have these visits, I would become obsessed with, making sure that we checked all the boxes. But it's important too to make sure that units are not just operating under that Joint Commission lens when it's the week of Joint Commission. You should always be operating under a Joint Commission lens year long. So nothing annoys me more than if you're working on a unit and they're not following policy, they're not following infection control standards in like January, because they're like, well, nobody's going to come by. Joint Commission isn't coming for a few months. Like, I'm busy. I can't wash that table right now. Well, if you don't make it the standard on your units to have those practices 24/7, 365 days a year, you will fail your Joint Commission, assessments. And nothing is more valuable and successful than having repetitive, correct behavior. So if you're doing the right things all the time, it will just become natural to you. So a lot of the consulting I do and what I'm willing to offer is coming in and doing an overall assessment of your facility, whether it be a single unit, a whole facility, and just honestly sitting and monitoring and kind of just seeing what it is I think that you need work on. And it could be that it's like, hey, you guys are actually doing great. I don't really have a ton here. It could be, I know you wanted me to look at this, but that's actually really not the problem. This is what's the problem. So yeah, and really targeting healthy work environments, making sure staff are feeling safe. And that could even go out of healthcare too. My friends always joke that they want me to come to their company because it's not that healthy right now. And I said, yeah, Just Culture can be used anywhere. Anywhere there's an employee, Just Culture needs to be utilized.
Interesting. So thank you for your time. It was enjoyable, the conversation. And
Yes.
because it is today a special day for you, also, I want to take this opportunity to ask this question for the first time. Now, I need from you to ask a question for my next guest. I don't know who are.
Okay.
Any question you think is good to ask my next guest?
Are they in healthcare?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. And they're, oh shoot, I probably can't ask many questions about it because
No, one question, but
Okay. So they're, I would just say, what are you doing in your current role to make sure that you are taking care of yourself and that you are healthy?
Yeah.
Because if you're not coming to the table as your best self, and whoever you're leading or whatever you're trying to do is not going to be its best. So
nice questions. Yeah, let's see who will answer these questions. And for sure, I will tag you for this answer when it's happened. So,
Good.
Susie, I will share your information down on the screen. Anyone can connect with you. And I encourage everyone to connect with Susie. Susie, full of energy and collaboration, and you will learn a lot from her. One things, and after that, I will finish our episode. What is your one advice for the new generation?
Advice for the new generation is to learn how to identify new generation in healthcare or just new
Yes.
generation. Learn how to identify not only the people around you, trauma and emotions, and how to read the room and respond appropriately, but also how to read your own traumas and emotions and respond accordingly. Never really had any support or education around that as a 20-something student or new worker. It was just get out there and work and suck it up, buttercup, and you'll be good. And can you work 12 shifts? And can you do this? And I would say take care of yourself. Your mental health is first. Your family is first. They'll always be there. Work can always change.
What an energy to end up our call today. Thank you, Susie, for your time. I'm looking forward to see your achievement and bring you back with something new to share with us. Have a good day.
Excellent. I look forward to it. This was awesome. Thank you so much, Anis.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If this episode sparked something in you, here's how you can keep our mission alive. Subscribe to Uncharted Narratives Certiat. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps more amazing people discover our stories. Share an episode that moved you with a colleague or friend. Connect with me on LinkedIn and join our healthcare innovation community. Together, we're not just telling stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay passionate, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in healthcare. See you in the next episode of Uncharted Narratives Sardiyat.